My name is Jessica Miller and I am 32 years old, living and working in the quiet, green town of Willow Creek, Oregon. For years, I have been a dedicated mail carrier and I truly love my job. There is something profoundly satisfying about being a small, vital part of the community, connecting people through letters, packages, and bills. I know the streets of Willow Creek like the back of my hand, and I take pride in my efficiency, making sure every piece of mail gets to its rightful owner. I value hard work and respect, and I believe in treating everyone with courtesy, even when they don't always return the favor. My daily rhythm involves the comforting hum of my mail truck, the friendly nods from residents, and the constant beauty of Oregon's changing seasons, all seen from behind the wheel. My life was pretty straightforward, focused on doing a good job and enjoying the simple, honest work that put food on my table. I always thought of myself as dependable, a person you could count on. Then came that sweltering July day that completely shook my world. I was working a day off, covering a route that was not my usual one in an upscale neighborhood I barely knew. These houses were big, older homes, many of them having mailboxes tucked away in the back in what used to be old milk chutes from a time long past. I had already delivered to 4 or 5 houses with these unusual back of the house mailboxes, so when I approached the next grand residence, I naturally headed to the backyard, expecting to find the mailbox there. I searched everywhere, squinting in the bright sun, but there was no chute, no box, just a beautifully landscaped garden and pristine windows. Confused, I put the mail back into my bag and decided to move on, planning to figure out where to deliver it later. As I walked back to my truck, a woman whom I would later come to know as Mrs. Henderson came charging out of her house, her face red and contorted with anger. She started screaming, demanding to know my name and what I thought I was doing in her backyard. She accused me of being suspicious, of looking into her windows, and of casing her house to come back and rob her later. I was stunned. I tried to explain calmly that I was a mail carrier looking for her mailbox, as I had found others in the backyards on that street. I mentioned that I hadn't seen a mail slot in her front door, which, to be fair, was painted the exact same color as the door, making it nearly invisible. But she just kept yelling, absolutely refusing to believe a word I said. She had decided I was a criminal, pure and simple, and nothing I said would change her mind. My heart started pounding with disbelief and a growing sense of injustice. The whole situation was so absurd, so far removed from my reality, that I actually started to laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh, more like a nervous, disbelieving chuckle at the sheer ridiculousness of her accusations. But that only seemed to fuel her rage. She demanded my name again, her voice shrill and piercing. I was so taken aback, so insulted by her completely unfair judgment of my character, that I responded with something I remembered from kindergarten, a silly rule my teacher used to tell us. I was told in kindergarten not to give strangers my name. This really, truly enraged her beyond anything I could have imagined. Her face turned an even deeper shade of red, and she stormed off, screaming at the top of her lungs that she was calling the police and that I would regret this. I just shook my head, thinking whatever, and finished my route, still reeling from the unexpected confrontation. When I got back to the post office, my supervisor and manager were already there, laughing their heads off. It turned out Mrs. Henderson and her husband, Mr. Henderson, had indeed called. They had demanded I be fired, insisting I was attempting to rob their house. My manager told me the husband had kept him on the phone for nearly 15 minutes, ranting about how I looked like a criminal lowlife and how his wife thought I was on drugs. He had also demanded my name, claiming they needed it for the police when their house was inevitably robbed. My manager, bless his heart, had flat out refused to give them my name, and he said the guy was practically screaming, with his wife's angry shouts echoing in the background. Even though my supervisor and manager stood by me, the words criminal low life and on drugs stung. They pierced through my usual armor of professionalism and left a deep, raw wound. I felt so violated, so unfairly judged by people who knew nothing about me simply for doing my job. I immediately spoke to Maria, my coworker, who was the regular carrier for that specific route. She just rolled her eyes and confirmed my suspicions, saying, "Oh, the Hendersons. They are the biggest jerks on my entire route, always complaining about something, always making trouble." Her words validated my feelings, making me feel a little less alone, but also cemented the idea that these people were truly awful. For the rest of the summer, I avoided that street like the plague. I would swap routes if I could or find excuses not to cover it. The memory of Mrs. Henderson's furious face and Mr. Henderson's nasty words lingered, a sour taste in my mouth. But as a mail carrier, you cannot always choose your battles or your streets. There are days when you just have to cover where you're needed, and then one day, months later, my turn came again. I was assigned to the Hendersons' route. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I saw their address on my manifest. All the anger and humiliation from that day in July came rushing back. They had called me a criminal lowlife, accused me of being on drugs, and tried to get me fired, all for an honest mistake. They believed themselves to be so superior, so clean, while labeling me as dirty and dishonest. I felt trapped. I was still bound by my uniform, my duty, and the rigid rules of my profession, unable to truly defend myself or return their baseless insults. The unfairness of it all gnawed at me, leaving me feeling powerless and disrespected. Despite knowing my supervisors had my back, the sting of being verbally assaulted and slandered by these people for simply doing my job had settled deep within me. It felt like they had gone away with it scot-free and probably continued to treat other carriers with the same contempt. I felt a growing, powerful need to take back some small piece of my dignity, to somehow make them understand in a way only I would know that I was not their criminal lowlife. I needed to respond silently, personally, to their baseless accusations. As I pulled my Dodge Promaster mail truck onto their street, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. The familiar anger flared up, mixing with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I reached their house, the same grand, imposing structure that had caused me so much grief. I parked my truck and then, with a deliberate motion, I closed the sliding door between the front cab and the cargo area, cutting myself off from the outside world. I looked at their mail, a stack of envelopes and flyers, crisp and pristine, just waiting to be delivered into their supposedly perfect lives. They had called me dirty, a low life. Well, I decided right then and there I would give them a piece of my dirtiness. I had been working a double shift, and the Oregon summer heat had been relentless, even though it was now cooler. My mail carrier vest was still slightly damp with the sweat from hours of hauling heavy packages, walking long stretches, and climbing in and out of the truck. It smelled exactly like a long day's work, the honest scent of physical effort, a scent I knew they would probably consider beneath them, a smell of the common working class. With a slow, unhurried motion, I took off my mail carrier vest. I turned it inside out, exposing the part that had been pressed against my body all day, absorbing my sweat and the essence of my hard work. My hands were steady, my expression grim. I took the inside of that vest where my body had been all day, where my skin had sweated and where the faint scent of me lingered, and I carefully, thoroughly rubbed it across every single piece of their mail. Every envelope, every magazine, every bill. I made sure my personal mark touched them all. Piece of me, the dirty lowlife they imagined, would now be delivered right into their pristine, undeserving home. I zipped my vest back on, a quiet, fierce satisfaction blooming in my chest. It wasn't violence, it wasn't illegal, but it was deeply personal and only I would ever know. I delivered their mail just like any other day, walking quickly to their painted front door slot, a slight knowing smirk playing on my lips. In the weeks that followed, a quiet, lasting satisfaction settled over me. Every time I thought about the Hendersons, I pictured them opening their mail, completely unaware of the invisible, personal touch I had added. They would never know, and that was the best part. I knew something they didn't, a secret revenge that was entirely my own. It felt like I had taken back a tiny piece of the respect they had stolen from me, a silent, personal victory. My job continued, and I continued to be the dedicated mail carrier I always was, but now there was a little spark of resilience, a knowing twinkle in my eye when I passed their house. I saw Maria, the regular carrier, a few weeks later. She rolled her eyes as usual when the Hendersons came up in conversation. "You won't believe it," she said. "Mrs. Henderson stopped me yesterday complaining about some weird faint smell on their mail, almost like gym socks or something." She was going on and on about how the post office needs to improve its hygiene practices for carriers. Can you imagine? I tried my best to keep a straight face, but inside I erupted in a silent burst of triumphant laughter. The Hendersons, in their endless quest for things to complain about, had noticed. They might not have known what it was or where it came from, but they had felt the subtle, poetic consequence of their own nasty judgment. The seed of my revenge had quietly, subtly blossomed. delivering a sweet secret justice that only I would ever truly savor.